My name is Josh, 32 years old, and I work as a project manager at a tech company. You know, one of those guys who's doing well enough but not rich. Life had been normal for me, married to Rachel, 30, a beautiful woman who worked as a yoga instructor. We had the kind of relationship that people envied on the surface, happy, healthy, and full of laughter, or at least that's what I thought. Then there's my best friend, Nate. He's 33, runs his own landscaping business, and is married to Lauren, 29. Nate and I had known each other since college, brothers in everything but blood. We shared beers, went on double dates, even helped each other move. He was the one guy I trusted more than anyone, next to my wife. And now, all of that felt like a distant memory, shattered in the most outrageous way possible. It all started on a Friday night. I got home early from work, a rare treat. Rachel had told me she had a late yoga class that evening, and Nate had texted earlier, saying he was going to drop by after finishing some landscaping job nearby. So, I kicked back on the couch with a cold beer, expecting a chill night. But something gnawed at me, this weird gut feeling. You know when something feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me. Rachel's car was still in the driveway, even though she was supposed to be at her yoga class. Maybe she came back for something she forgot. I dismissed it, figuring she'd be out soon. But then I saw Nate's truck parked a few blocks down, halfway hidden behind some trees. What was Nate doing here before even texting me? The pit in my stomach tightened. I made my way through the house, everything feeling surreal, like I wasn't walking in my own home. As I climbed the stairs, I heard noises that hit me like a punch to the gut. Low, guttural sounds. Moaning. For a second, I froze, telling myself I must be hearing things. No way. It couldn't be what I was thinking. But curiosity got the better of me, and before I could stop myself, I followed the sounds, creeping toward our bedroom like some kind of detective in a cheap thriller. When I reached the door, my heart was pounding in my chest so loud I thought they'd hear it. I pushed the door open just an inch, enough to see the unthinkable. There was Rachel, bent over the side of our bed, her face twisted in ecstasy, while Nate, my best friend, was behind her, doing things I can't even bring myself to describe fully. And the worst part? He wasn't just having sex with her. He was absolutely obliterating her in ways I never thought possible. It was raw, primal, and filthy. The sheer absurdity of the situation hit me like a truck. My wife, my Rachel, was cheating on me, right there in our bed, with my closest friend, and they were doing it like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt my throat go dry, my hands trembling with rage, disgust, and disbelief. I should have barged in and broken it up, should have screamed or swung at Nate, but instead, I stood there, frozen, like a deer caught in the headlights. Time slowed down, and I realized how ridiculous it all was. I had been fooled, played. They were having the time of their lives, while I was outside the door like some kind of voyeur to my own nightmare. The thought of Nate's wife, Lauren, flashed in my mind. She had no idea this was happening. She thought her husband was the perfect family man. I couldn't keep watching. It was like staring into the sun, too painful to endure. So I stepped back, quietly, not ready to confront them. Not yet. I had to think. I had to process what I had just seen. Was this really happening? As I stumbled downstairs, everything felt surreal, like I was living in someone else's life. I sat in the kitchen, numb, staring at the clock as minutes turned into hours. Eventually, I heard the creak of footsteps. Rachel and Nate were coming down the stairs, laughing, like they hadn't just shattered my world into a million pieces. Rachel saw me first, her face paling instantly, guilt washing over her like she'd been hit with a bucket of ice water. Nate's face, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Josh, it's not what it looks like, Rachel started, but the stammering in her voice betrayed her. Nate stood there, frozen, his face drained of color. Josh, man. I cut him off. Don't even try. I saw everything. Rachel broke into sobs, but I didn't care about her crocodile tears. I turned my gaze to Nate, my so-called best friend, and the words left my mouth before I even thought them through. If you want me to keep quiet about this, you better start talking. Why the hell would you do this? He stood there, hands shaking, trying to come up with an excuse, but nothing came. He was terrified, not because he hurt me, no, he was scared of what would happen when his wife found out. Lauren, his perfect, oblivious wife, who trusted him the way I used to trust Rachel. I let the silence hang for a while. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't going to just let this slide. And that's when I realized I held all the cards. Nate was begging me with his eyes, pleading silently. He had no idea that I had one hell of a plan already forming in my mind. Nate stood there, his face twisted in fear, his entire body stiff like a man waiting for his execution. Rachel was sobbing into her hands, her mascara streaked down her face as if the tears were going to somehow wash away the guilt. But all I could feel was cold rage bubbling just beneath the surface. I had already seen the worst of it, or so I thought. My best friend and my wife had just annihilated whatever was left of my marriage. But part of me knew I needed more answers. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, letting the silence stretch painfully long. Every second that passed only made Nate squirm more. He couldn't meet my eyes, and Rachel wouldn't stop sobbing. The weight of the situation pressed on my chest, but I kept my cool. I needed to hear it from him. "Nate," I said slowly, dragging out his name. His head jerked up like he was surprised I even said anything. "I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He glanced at Rachel, who was practically hyperventilating, before his eyes found the floor again. "Josh, man," he started, his voice shaky. "I swear, it's not what it looks like. I never meant for it to happen. It just..." I slammed my hand down on the counter, the sharp crack echoing through the kitchen. "Don't you dare give me that it just happened bullshit. I saw you. I saw every filthy thing you did to her. So cut the crap and give me the truth before I go straight to Lauren and tell her everything." At the mention of his wife, Nate paled even more, if that was even possible. His lip trembled, and I knew I had him right where I wanted him. He was terrified of losing his perfect little life. Terrified of Lauren finding out that her loving, devoted husband had been screwing his best friend's wife behind her back. Okay, he stammered. "I'll tell you, just give me a minute." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter, watching as he struggled to find the words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and filled with shame. "It started about 6 months ago," Nate admitted, his eyes still fixed on the floor. "After that barbecue at your place, remember? When Lauren and I came over? We all had a few too many drinks, and you went to bed early. Rachel and I stayed up, and one thing led to another." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 6 months. They'd been doing this for 6 months. All those nights we'd hung out as couples, laughing, drinking, talking about our futures, all a sham. A sick joke that I hadn't been in on. My best friend and my wife had been sneaking behind my back for half a year, all while pretending everything was normal. My stomach churned, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. 6 months, I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. "You've been screwing my wife for 6 months, Nate." He nodded miserably, his hands hanging limp at his sides. I turned to Rachel, who was still sobbing, her face red and blotchy. "You've been cheating on me for 6 months, Rachel? You didn't think I deserved to know?" I spat, my voice rising. I didn't mean for it to happen," she whimpered, her voice barely audible through her sobs. "I was confused. Josh, I love you, I swear, but things just happened with Nate. I don't even know how it started. It was just one time at first, and then it kept happening. I didn't know how to stop." Her excuses were like knives in my gut, twisting deeper with every word. Confused, she didn't know how to stop. She had every opportunity to tell me the truth, to come clean, but instead, she kept lying to my face, night after night, pretending like we were happy while she was screwing my best friend behind my back. "So, what?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You two just couldn't resist each other? You couldn't keep your hands off each other for 6 months, in my house, while I was right there?" Rachel sobbed harder, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to let her crocodile tears get to me. Nate shifted uncomfortably, his hands twitching at his sides. I turned my attention back to him. "And what about Lauren?" I asked, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Does she know about your little affair, or have you been lying to her this whole time too?" Nate's face flushed with shame. "She doesn't know," he mumbled. "I swear, Josh, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I've been trying to end it for months. I didn't want things to go this far." A bitter laugh escaped my throat. "Trying to end it? Are you kidding me? You didn't look like you were trying to end anything up there." Nate winced, his eyes finally meeting mine for a brief moment before darting away again. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I know I screwed up. I know I've hurt you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Just, please don't tell Lauren." And there it was, the real reason behind his guilt. Not because he cared about what he'd done to me, but because he was terrified of losing his wife. Terrified of losing the cushy life they'd built together. The family man image. The loving husband. The perfect couple. But as I stared at him, something wasn't adding up. 6 months. It was too clean, too convenient of a timeline. That's when it hit me, there was more to this. Nate, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're still not telling me the whole truth, are you? He froze, his eyes widening in panic. He shot a glance at Rachel, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. The silence that followed was deafening, and I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. There was something else, something even worse. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. If you don't tell me right now, Nate, I swear I'll tell Lauren everything. And I'll make sure she knows every single dirty detail. Nate's face drained of color, and his hands started shaking again. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he broke. I'm sorry, Josh, he whispered, his voice barely audible. There's more. My heart raced. What more could there possibly be? Nate swallowed hard, his eyes darting to Rachel again before he finally said the words that would change everything. It wasn't just me. For a moment, I couldn't even process what he was saying. My mind went blank. What wasn't just him? What the hell are you talking about? I demanded. Nate's voice trembled as he continued. Rachel, she's been seeing someone else too. Someone you don't know. I found out a few weeks ago. I stared at him, stunned into silence. My wife had been cheating on me with Nate, and someone else? Rachel's sobs grew louder, and I felt like the floor was falling out from beneath me. My entire world had already been torn apart, but now there was more. There was always more. I couldn't even look at her. The betrayal wasn't just deep, it was endless. And the worst part? Nate had known about it 4 weeks and said nothing. He had kept it from me even while he was cheating with her himself. The room spun around me, the weight of their lies suffocating. This was more than just infidelity. This was a total betrayal of everything I had ever known. Rachel wasn't just unfaithful. She was a complete stranger to me now. I don't know how long I stood there, staring blankly at Nate as his confession sank deeper into my bones. It felt like time had frozen, trapping me in the suffocating weight of the betrayal. Rachel's sobs were now just background noise, a pathetic soundtrack to this twisted drama that my life had become. Nate's words echoed in my head, each one more absurd and outrageous than the last. It wasn't just me, she's been seeing someone else too. Someone else? My mind reeled. How could this be real? My wife, the woman I built my life with, had been cheating on me not just with my best friend, but with some other guy too? How many layers of lies had I been living under? And Nate, he knew. He knew 4 weeks and didn't tell me, even while he was doing God knows what with Rachel himself. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt trapped in this nightmare, where nothing made sense, and every time I thought I had hit rock bottom, the ground caved in further beneath me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of thoughts swirling in my head, but the rage was building again, hotter this time, more intense. It was a slow, burning fury, something deeper than the initial shock of betrayal. It was like realizing, all at once, that the people closest to you were never who you thought they were. They had been living secret lives, spinning webs of deceit right in front of your eyes. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed the truth. I needed to know how deep this hole really went. Who? I demanded, my voice cold and sharp like a blade. Who else? Rachel? She looked up at me through her tears, her face a twisted mask of guilt and panic. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. I could see the fear in her eyes, fear of what would happen when the last of her lies came tumbling out. I asked you a question, I snapped, taking a step toward her. Who else have you been seeing? And don't lie to me again, Rachel. I swear, I've had enough of your lies. Rachel wiped at her tears with shaking hands, her gaze flickering between me and Nate, as if looking for some kind of lifeline. But Nate was in no position to help her now. He was just as trapped in this mess as she was. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she whispered the name, Jason. The word slipped out of her mouth so quietly, I almost didn't hear it. Jason. For a second, I couldn't even place who she was talking about. Jason? Who the hell was Jason? And then it hit me like a freight train. Jason Weller, the contractor, the guy we hired to renovate the basement. Tall, athletic, mid-30s, married with 2 kids. He'd come by the house a few times to check in on the progress, and Rachel always seemed to handle the details with him. She'd insisted on it, saying I was too busy with work. The memories came flooding back, Rachel's sudden interest in redecorating the house, the extra time she'd spend in the basement overseeing the renovation. I had chalked it up to her usual obsession with getting things just right. But now, everything was starting to make sense. You've been sleeping with Jason, the contractor? I asked, my voice rising with disbelief. Are you kidding me, Rachel? You've been screwing the guy who's fixing our damn basement? Rachel flinched at the harshness in my voice, her tears spilling over again. It wasn't supposed to happen, she whimpered. It was just one night at first. After he finished the initial work, he invited me to his place to discuss some design ideas. And I don't know how, but it got out of control. I laughed bitterly, running my hands through my hair. Out of control? That's your excuse? You accidentally slept with him, and then what? Kept doing it for fun? She shook her head, her hands wringing nervously in her lap. It wasn't like that, Josh. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just, I don't know. Things between us had been strained, and Jason made me feel wanted. I was confused. The word confused again. Always confused. Like that was some kind of excuse for ruining a marriage. Like that could somehow justify all the betrayal, the sneaking around, the lies. I was done listening to her nonsense. So, let me get this straight, I said, pacing in front of them, the anger simmering just below the surface. You've been cheating on me with 2 different men? For 6 months with Nate and who knows how long with Jason, all while playing the perfect wife at home. Is that about right? Rachel's sobs intensified, and Nate just sat there, looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Good. They deserved to feel every ounce of this guilt. But there was something else that wasn't sitting right with me. Nate had said he found out a few weeks ago about Jason. How did that happen? And why didn't he tell me when he found out? Why did he keep sleeping with Rachel even after learning she was screwing someone else? I turned back to Nate, narrowing my eyes. And you, I said, my voice dripping with disdain. You knew she was seeing Jason and didn't say a word to me. You kept this whole thing quiet so you could keep having your fun with her too, didn't you? Nate's face flushed red with shame, and he struggled to meet my eyes. I didn't want to tell you, Josh, he muttered. I didn't know how. I found out by accident. A few weeks ago, I saw them together, Jason and Rachel. I went to your place to drop off some tools I borrowed, and I saw them, in the garage, kissing. My stomach churned. The garage. That place where I'd stood countless times, working on projects, trusting that my wife was faithful. And all the while, she'd been in there with Jason, doing God knows what. Why didn't you tell me then? I demanded. Why didn't you stop everything and tell me the truth? Nate shifted uncomfortably, his guilt plastered all over his face. I was going to, but I didn't know what to do. I felt guilty, for everything I was doing too. I tried to confront Rachel about Jason, but she kept saying it was over between them. That it was just a mistake. I didn't want to make things worse, so I stayed quiet. I stared at him, disgusted. You stayed quiet because you didn't want to lose her, didn't you? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was written all over his face. Nate had kept his mouth shut because he wanted to keep Rachel for himself, even if it meant betraying both me and his wife. Rachel had the audacity to pipe up between sobs. I told Jason it was over, Josh. I swear, I ended it weeks ago, but I don't know how to fix this. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I let out another bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the silence. Love me? You call this love? You've been sleeping with 2 different men behind my back, and you love me? She nodded frantically, her tears falling harder now. I do, Josh. I know I messed up, but I love you. I was confused, and things got out of control, but I never wanted to lose you. I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. She still thought she could salvage this, still thought there was some way to fix everything after the lies, the betrayal, the sheer insanity of what she'd done. And then, out of nowhere, the reality hit me like a freight train. The past 6 months, the late nights, the lies about girls' nights and work trips, the way she had distanced herself from me, it had all been a farce. She had created this entire double life, and I had been blind to it. The rage that had been simmering finally boiled over. I turned to Nate, my fists clenched. Get the hell out of my house, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Josh, man, please. Get out. Nate scrambled to his feet, looking like he had been slapped across the face. He knew better than to argue. He grabbed his coat and stumbled toward the door, casting one last, pitiful glance at Rachel before disappearing out into the night. Rachel stood there, trembling, waiting for what I would say next. But I couldn't even look at her. My mind was swirling with too much rage, too much disbelief. I couldn't process it all. I need some air, I muttered, my voice shaking. Without another word, I stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Rachel sobbing behind me. The night air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped out of the house. Each breath I took stung with the chill of betrayal. I paced down the driveway, my heart racing, my mind racing even faster. I couldn't believe the mess my life had become. One moment, I was living a life I thought was perfect, and the next, I was drowning in a sea of lies. I found myself standing under the flickering street lamp at the edge of our property, staring into the darkness. The world around me was silent, but inside, a storm was raging. Anger, hurt, confusion, it all churned together, each emotion battling for dominance. Nate, Rachel, Jason, the three names echoed in my mind, each one a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. It felt surreal. Was this really my life? Was I really standing here, thinking about my best friend and my wife in such a disgustingly intimate way? My phone buzzed in my pocket, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. I pulled it out, half expecting to see a text from Rachel, begging me to come back inside, to talk this through. But it was a message from Steve, my old college roommate. "Hey man, just checking in. Let's catch up soon." I stared at the screen, feeling an overwhelming urge to reach out to someone, anyone. But what would I say? "Hey, my wife's been cheating on me with my best friend, and now I don't know what to do." The weight of the situation was suffocating. I decided to go for a drive, hoping the movement would clear my mind. I hopped into my car and slammed the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. As I drove through the empty streets of our neighborhood, memories flooded back. Laughing with Rachel over dinners, planning trips, discussing future dreams. All of it was tainted now, poisoned by the reality of what she had done. After driving aimlessly for a while, I ended up at the lake, a spot where Rachel and I had spent countless evenings watching the sunset. It used to be our sanctuary, a place filled with laughter and love. I parked the car and stepped out, the cool breeze wrapping around me. The water shimmered under the moonlight, but it felt foreign, unwelcoming. I walked to the edge of the lake, staring at my reflection rippling in the water. Who was I now? I felt like a stranger in my own life. I had given Rachel everything, my heart, my trust, my future. And for what? For her to throw it all away in a moment of weakness, or perhaps it wasn't weakness at all. Maybe it was something darker, something more sinister. Suddenly, the floodgates opened, and the anger surged back, overwhelming me. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shatter something beautiful. But instead, I just stood there, fists clenched, breathing heavily. Then it hit me, Nate. What had he done after I kicked him out? Had he gone back to his wife, or was he still planning to sneak around with Rachel? The thought churned my stomach. I had to confront him. I had to make sure this ended once and for all. I drove back home, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Once I parked in the driveway, I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the doorknob. I could hear Rachel inside, the muffled sound of her crying breaking my heart all over again. But there was no going back. I couldn't just sit idly by while she tore our lives apart. I stepped inside, ready to confront her again. She was sitting on the couch, a crumpled tissue in hand, eyes puffy and red. But the moment she saw me, she quickly wiped her face, attempting to regain some composure. It was almost laughable, the way she thought she could mask the devastation she had caused. "Josh, please," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I couldn't bear to hear those words again. "You say that, but you did it anyway," over and over again. "How can you expect me to believe anything you say?" Her lips quivered as she tried to find the right words. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's not what you think. I ended things with Jason a while ago. Nate, he was just a one-time thing. I thought it was over after that, I swear." "Rachel, this isn't just about Nate or Jason anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "This is about trust. You've shattered everything we built together. I don't know how to move past this. How do I know this isn't just another lie?" Rachel's face fell, and for a moment, I thought she might finally understand the gravity of what she'd done. "I can prove it to you. I can show you that I'm committed to fixing this. Just give me a chance. Please." I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You think I want to go back to the way things were? You think I can just forget this? You destroyed our marriage. How can I trust you again?" "I love you, Josh," she said, her voice breaking. "I need you to believe that. I don't want to lose you. I can't lose you." Her words felt empty, like a hollow echo in the void of my heart. The warmth that had once surrounded our love had turned to ice, and I didn't know how to thaw it. I wanted to feel something, anything other than this suffocating pain. "I don't know if I can believe that," I replied, my voice low. "You've broken my heart too many times now. How can I trust that you won't do this again?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, and I could see the despair written all over her face. But part of me felt nothing for her sadness. All I felt was the weight of betrayal hanging heavily in the air. I couldn't keep pretending everything would go back to normal. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, as we both grappled with the reality of what had happened. But just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, the doorbell rang, shattering the tense atmosphere. I shot a look at Rachel, who seemed equally bewildered. Who could that be? I asked, my heart racing again. I don't know, she replied, wiping her tears hastily. Maybe it's a neighbor? But deep down, I had a sinking feeling it was something more, something I wasn't ready for. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The last thing I wanted was to face another unexpected surprise. When I opened the door, I was met with the sight of a familiar figure standing on my porch, Jason Weller, the contractor, the very man who had contributed to this twisted mess. What do you want? I snapped, the anger flaring back up again. Jason looked at me, his expression a mix of defiance and concern. I came to talk. We need to clear the air about Rachel. I could feel my blood boiling. Talk? You think I want to talk to you after everything that's happened? You think you can just waltz back into my life and… Josh, please, Jason interrupted, raising his hands in surrender. I'm not here to fight. I need you to understand. Rachel and I. Understand? Understand what? That you're just another guy who thought he could sneak around behind my back. I stepped closer, my fists clenched, ready to throw down if I needed to. No, it's not like that, he exclaimed, desperation creeping into his voice. You don't know the whole story, and that's when it happened, the twist I didn't see coming. I suddenly remembered something Rachel had said earlier, about how she ended things with Jason weeks ago. But why was he here now? Tell me everything, I demanded, my voice steady, curious despite the anger coursing through me. And don't hold back. I want the truth. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, Rachel and I did have something that went too far. But I told her it was over, just like she told you. I didn't want to ruin your marriage. I didn't want to hurt her. I thought it was done. Then why are you here now? I pressed, the fire in my gut roaring. If you thought it was over, why are you still involved? He hesitated, as if weighing his words. Because she called me 2 days ago, Josh. Said she was having trouble with you and needed someone to talk to. I came here to make sure she was okay. I thought we could fix things. I never meant for this to spiral out of control. I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. You think this is fixing things? You've been screwing around with my wife, and now you want to come back and play hero? No, that's not what I meant, he said, desperation rising in his voice. I care about her. I do, but it's complicated. I never wanted to hurt you, and Rachel, she's been through so much. I thought she was done with all this. So you're saying it's my fault? That if I hadn't come home early that night, everything would be fine? No, I didn't mean that, Jason said, his frustration bubbling over. I don't know what to say. I care about Rachel, but I didn't think it would escalate like this. I thought it was just a fling, something fun, and then it turned serious. I didn't want that. The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air, and I felt the anger begin to dissipate, replaced by a sense of confusion. This was all too much. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, trying to regain my composure. Why didn't you come clean before? Because I was scared, he replied, his voice rising in pitch. I didn't want to hurt either of you. I didn't know how to handle it. In that moment, I felt a glimmer of sympathy for him. We were both trapped in this web of betrayal and confusion, both victims of Rachel's choices. But it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that my life was in ruins. I don't know what to do with this information, Jason, I said, my voice shaking. You're just adding fuel to the fire. He nodded, looking defeated. I know, I'm sorry. I thought it was over. I never meant for it to go this far. The silence stretched again, heavy with unsaid words. Rachel stood in the background, her face pale, unsure of how to intervene. I felt trapped between the two of them, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, and it was suffocating. Listen, I said finally, taking a deep breath. I don't know where we go from here. I don't know how to fix this. But what I do know is that Rachel needs to make a choice. And it has to be a choice for me, not for you. Jason nodded, his eyes filled with regret. I get it. I really do. Just know that I care about her, man. I hope you can figure things out. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing on the porch, my heart heavy with uncertainty. I looked back at Rachel, who stood there, her eyes pleading, full of fear and regret. Josh, she whispered, taking a step toward me. I'm so sorry. Please, just give me a chance to explain. I never wanted any of this to happen. But as I stared into her eyes, I knew I had to make a decision. It was time to take back control of my life. I couldn't keep letting her choices dictate my happiness. Rachel, I said, my voice firm. I need time to think. I need space to figure out what I want and what I deserve. And right now, I don't know if that includes you." Her face fell, but I didn't feel the familiar pang of guilt. I felt empowered. This was my life, and I wouldn't let her or anyone else dictate how I felt anymore. I walked past her, heading for the bedroom, my heart racing with every step. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a mixture of relief and fear. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms.